Maya Chen had always believed that truth was worth any price. As the neural lash crackled against her spine for the third time that cycle, she was beginning to question that conviction. "State your contacts," the Vraxian guard demanded, his crystalline form refracting the harsh lights of the interrogation chamber. "Who helped you access the restricted data?" Maya's muscles spasmed from the aftershocks, but she kept her expression neutral. 6 months in Nexus 7 had taught her that showing weakness only invited more pain. "As I've said before, I worked alone. I'm just a journalist who followed the evidence." The Vraxian's crystalline features shifted in what Maya had learned was their equivalent of a sneer. "No human works alone. Your kind are too social." He adjusted a dial on the neural lash's control panel. "Perhaps maximum sensitivity will loosen your tongue." Maya braced herself, but the expected pain didn't come. Instead, a new voice echoed through the chamber speakers. "That's enough. Officer Crix, return the prisoner to her cell." The Vraxian's form clouded with anger, but he couldn't disobey a direct order from the warden. As he roughly disconnected the neural lash, Maya caught a glimpse of her reflection in his faceted surface. 6 months had transformed her from an award-winning investigative journalist into this gaunt figure with hollow eyes, but those eyes still burned with determination. The story that had landed her in Nexus 7 was bigger than she'd initially realized. What had started as an investigation into missing colony ships had led her to uncover a vast trafficking network, one that reached into the highest levels of the Galactic Conclave. She'd managed to transmit her findings before they caught her, but the evidence alone wasn't enough. They needed names, connections, proof that would stand up in conclave courts. Maya's cell was located in Block D, reserved for prisoners considered threats to galactic security. The irony wasn't lost on her. She shared a cell block with actual terrorists, while the real criminals walked free in the corridors of power. As the force field buzzed to life behind her, Maya began her usual routine of stretches. The neural lash left her muscles knotted and weak, but she couldn't afford to let her physical condition deteriorate. Survival in Nexus 7 required strength, both mental and physical. "They hurt you again, small one." The rumbling voice came from the cell across from hers. Gorn, a massive Kralaxian with armor-plated skin, had become an unlikely ally during her imprisonment. Like her, he'd run afoul of powerful interests in the Conclave. "Nothing I can't handle," Maya replied, completing her stretches, "though I'm getting tired of Crix's hospitality." Gorn's laugh sounded like grinding stones. Vraxians, so proud of their perfect crystalline forms, they forget that pressure makes diamonds. He pressed closer to the force field of his cell. "The others are ready. When you give the word." Maya shook her head slightly. "Not yet. We need to understand more about what's happening in the restricted sectors. The trafficking operation is connected to something here in Nexus 7. I can feel it." "Your human instincts." Gorn's tone was curious rather than mocking. In their months of conversation, he'd developed a respect for what he called Maya's strange mammalian intuition. "Pattern recognition," she corrected. "Too many high-security transports. Too much classified equipment. This isn't just a prison. It's..." A piercing alarm cut through their conversation. Red emergency lights began pulsing along the corridors. Maya pressed against her force field, trying to see what was happening. In 6 months, she'd never heard that particular alarm. The force fields flickered, then stabilized at half strength, a security measure during power fluctuations. Through the shimmer, Maya saw guards rushing past, their weapons drawn. Something was very wrong. "Gorn," she whispered urgently. "What's happening?" The Kralaxians' natural armor plates had shifted to their alert position. Power surged from the lower levels. "But that's impossible. Nothing down there should have enough energy to..." He stopped suddenly, his sensory ridges flaring. "Maya, the air." She felt it too. A subtle change in the atmospheric pressure, accompanied by an acrid taste that reminded her of burned circuitry. Whatever was happening, it was affecting the prison's environmental systems. Through the chaos of alarms and running guards, Maya heard something else, a low, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to come from deep below the prison's foundations. It wasn't a sound so much as a vibration that resonated in her bones. She'd felt something similar once before, while investigating the disappeared colony ships. The same frequency, the same unsettling resonance. This was it, the connection she'd been looking for. Maya pressed her palm against the weakened force field. The barrier sparked and crackled, but she barely noticed the pain. After 6 months of dead ends and neural lashes, she finally had a lead. Whatever dark, secret Nexus 7 was hiding, it was about to be exposed. She caught Gorn's eye and gave him the slightest nod. The Kralaxian's armor plates shifted again, this time in a pattern she recognized as anticipation. They'd spent months preparing for an opportunity. Now it had arrived in the most unexpected way. The alarms continued to wail as Maya began implementing the plan she crafted during countless sleepless nights. She was no longer just fighting for her own survival or even for justice. She was fighting for every disappeared colonist, every silenced truth seeker, every victim of the Conclave's corruption. And this time, she would make sure the truth couldn't be buried in a prison cell. The maintenance tunnels beneath Block D were never meant for human passage. Maya crawled through the narrow space, ignoring the burning in her lungs from the caustic atmosphere. The power fluctuation had lasted just long enough for her to slip through the weakened force field, leaving behind a small holographic projector that made her cell appear occupied. Above, the alarms had finally ceased, but the strange pulsing from below continued. Maya's journalist instincts told her she was close to something big. She'd seen too many classified documents with redacted references to Project Resonance to ignore the connection. 3 meters ahead, junction point, Iku's voice whispered through the modified communicator embedded in Maya's tooth. The Arxian information broker had been another unexpected ally, using their natural ability to interface with technology to help map the prison's layout. Maya reached the junction and paused, listening. The guards would be scanning for escaped prisoners, but they'd focus on the obvious routes. No one expected a human to survive in these maintenance tunnels. The atmospheric composition alone should have been lethal. What they didn't know was that humans were remarkably adaptable. Maya had spent months gradually exposing herself to the toxic atmosphere in small doses, building up a tolerance that now gave her an edge. It was excruciating, but pain had become a familiar companion. Security sweep approaching Block C, Iku reported. You have approximately 7 minutes before they reach your position. Maya moved faster, following the increasing resonance. The tunnel opened into a larger service shaft, and she nearly lost her grip when she saw what lay below. A massive chamber extended into darkness, filled with rows of cylindrical tanks that pulsed with an otherworldly light. Iku, she whispered, are you seeing this? Affirmative. Energy signatures matched those recorded from the missing colony ships. Maya, there are life signs in those tanks. Before she could process this revelation, a new sound echoed through the shaft, the distinctive click of multiple weapons being armed. Impressive, Ms. Chen. Warden Voss's voice was as smooth as ever. Though I must admit, I expected you to attempt this sooner. Maya turned slowly. The warden stood on a maintenance platform above her, flanked by guards. His elegant meridian physiology made him appear almost benevolent, but Maya knew better. She'd seen the casualty reports from his rehabilitation programs. The missing colonists, Maya said, forcing steadiness into her voice. This is where you've been keeping them. Why? Progress requires sacrifice, Ms. Chen. Surely a journalist understands this concept. The warden gestured at the tanks below. Humanity's greatest strength is also its greatest vulnerability. Your remarkable adaptability. The ability to survive, even thrive, in conditions that would kill most species. We simply repurpose this trait. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. The trafficking operation wasn't just about forced labor or ransom. They were using human adaptability itself as a resource, experimenting on colonists to unlock the secrets of their resilience. The resonance frequency, she continued, mind racing. It's not just for power fluctuations. You're using it to manipulate their cellular structure. Very good. The warden actually smiled. You see why we couldn't let your investigation continue. Though I must thank you. Your own impressive adaptations have provided valuable data. The tolerance you've developed to our atmosphere, for instance, remarkable. Maya's fingers brushed against the maintenance shaft's control panel. Months of planning had taught her every weakness in Nexus 7 systems, including one critical flaw. The environmental controls weren't isolated between sectors. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our adaptability, she said, meeting the warden's eyes. It's our capacity to act even when we know it might destroy us. Her fingers flew across the panel. Warning lights flashed as she initiated a cascading failure in the atmospheric containment system. Alarms blared anew as toxic atmosphere from the maintenance tunnels began flooding into the main prison. The guards' weapons wavered as they struggled to breathe. The warden's perfect composure cracked as he realized what she'd done. Maya used their moment of confusion to dive through a maintenance hatch, sealing it behind her. Iku. Tell Gorn to start the riot now. She ran through the toxic clouds, her conditioned lungs burning but functional. Throughout the prison, chaos erupted as atmosphere barriers failed and prisoners realized their cells were vulnerable. Maya. Iku's voice was urgent. The resonance frequency. It's increasing. Whatever they're doing to those colonists, your attack triggered some kind of acceleration. She could feel it, the pulsing growing stronger, more erratic. The entire prison seemed to vibrate with its rhythm. Maya forced herself to think past the pain in her lungs, past the horror of what she'd discovered. She had evidence now, proof of crimes that would shake the Galactic conclave to its foundations. But first, she had to survive what she'd started. The prison was tearing itself apart around her, filled with toxic atmosphere and desperate inmates. And somewhere above, the warden was undoubtedly preparing a lethal response to her defiance. Maya allowed herself a grim smile. They'd imprisoned her hoping to break her spirit, to make her abandon her search for truth. Instead, they'd given her exactly what she needed. Time to plan, allies to trust, and the motivation to tear their whole corrupt system down. The pulsing resonance reached a fever pitch as Maya ran deeper into the chaos of Nexus 7. Behind her, the first explosions began to rock the prison's foundations. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back. The truth was clawing its way into the light, one burning breath at a time. Nexus 7 was never designed to contain a full-scale riot. As Maya raced through the chaos of collapsing corridors, she witnessed the unleashed fury of a dozen species. Kralaxians like Gorn used their armored bodies as battering rams against security checkpoints. Arxians like Iku merged with the prison systems, turning automated defenses against the guards. But it was the human prisoners who truly terrified their captors. Despite the toxic atmosphere, despite neural suppressors and gravity restraints, they kept fighting. The guards had never understood that pain could be a motivator as much as a deterrent. The lower research levels are sealed. Iku's voice crackled through Maya's communicator. But I've detected multiple stasis pods activating. They're trying to move the colonists. Maya ducked into an alcove as another explosion rocked the facility. Can you override the pod controls? Negative. Those systems are isolated. But Maya, the resonance frequency is affecting the pod's containment fields. If they try to move them now, the colonists won't survive transport. Maya finished grimly. She pressed her hand against the wall, feeling the increasingly erratic pulses. Where's Gorn? Leading the distraction in Block C. He's quite enthusiastic about it. A squad of guards rushed past Maya's hiding spot, their environmental suits protecting them from the toxic atmosphere she'd released. She recognized the insignia on their armor, Warden Voss's personal security detail. Iku, I need a path to the research levels. The warden will be heading there to salvage what he can of the project. The main access points are blocked, but Iku paused. There might be a way. The resonance chambers connect to a waste disposal system. It's incredibly dangerous. The radiation levels alone should be lethal. Maya thought of the colonists in their pods, their bodies being twisted and experimented on to unlock the secrets of human adaptability. Send me the route. The waste disposal tunnels were worse than the maintenance shafts. Maya's enhanced tolerance to the toxic atmosphere meant little against the waves of radiation that made her skin crawl. But she pressed on, following Iku's directions through the maze of pipes and conduits. She wasn't alone in the tunnels. Other prisoners had found this route, desperate enough to risk radiation poisoning for a chance at freedom. Many weren't surviving the journey. Maya forced herself to keep moving past their bodies, memorizing faces to add to the list of the warden's victims. The resonance grew stronger as she descended, until it felt like her bones were vibrating in harmony with it. Through gaps in the tunnel walls, she caught glimpses of massive machinery, all pulsing with that same otherworldly rhythm. Maya. Iku's voice was tense. I've accessed more of the research files. The colonists, they weren't just studying human adaptability. They were trying to weaponize it. What do you mean? The resonance frequency. It doesn't just affect humans. It can transfer human adaptive traits to other species. They were trying to create soldiers that could survive any environment, adapt to any weapon. But the process is unstable. The failed subjects. A scream cut through the tunnels, unlike anything Maya had ever heard. It was followed by the sound of tearing metal and breaking glass. What was that? Maya whispered. Maya, run. The containment pods are failing. The subjects. Another scream, closer this time. Maya pressed herself against the tunnel wall as a shape lurched past an intersection ahead. It might once have been a Vraxian, but its crystalline form had grown organic components, twisted limbs that shouldn't exist. The failed fusion of human adaptability with alien physiology had created something horrifically wrong. The warden, Maya realized. He's not trying to salvage the project. He's trying to destroy the evidence, including the successful subjects. She checked her stolen neural lash, knowing it would be useless against the abominations ahead. But she hadn't come this far to turn back. Iku, I need you to send a message to every communications device in the prison. Tell them what's happening down here. Tell them about the colonists, the experiments, everything. And then, Maya, no, the radiation levels and the research levels are too high. Even with your enhanced tolerance, the colonists are still alive. I can feel it in the resonance, and I'm not leaving them to die. A moment of silence. Then, message sent. The entire prison knows what they did to the colonists. Korn says, he says it has been an honor. Maya smiled despite everything. Tell him the honor was mine. And Iku, thank you. She pushed away from the wall and moved deeper into the facility, following the sound of screams and breaking glass. The resonance had reached a fever pitch, as if the very atoms of Nexus 7 were tearing themselves apart. Ahead lay the heart of Project Resonance, where the warden's crimes would finally be exposed. Maya didn't know if she would survive what came next, but she knew that sometimes the price of truth was worth paying, no matter how high. The corridor ahead was filled with twisted shapes that had once been test subjects. Beyond them, she could hear the warden's voice giving orders, desperate to erase his sins before they could see the light. Maya took a deep breath of toxic air and stepped forward. It was time to show them what human adaptation really meant. The heart of Project Resonance was a cathedral of suffering. Maya stood in the doorway of the vast chamber, taking in the rows of containment pods that stretched into darkness. Each one held a colonist, their bodies suspended in a shimming field of energy that pulsed with that terrible rhythm. The warden stood at the chamber's central control platform, his elegant meridian features twisted with desperation as he worked the controls. Around him, his guards fought a losing battle against their own failed experiments. Former test subjects whose bodies had become horrific hybridizations of human and alien physiologies. You don't understand what you've done, the warden called out as Maya approached. These subjects are the key to evolutionary advancement. Their suffering serves a greater purpose. I understand perfectly. Maya's voice was raw from the toxic atmosphere, but steady. You tortured innocent people because you feared what humanity represents. Our adaptability threatens the established order of your precious conclave. A twisted figure lunged at her, perhaps once a Kralaxian, now a mass of armor plates and writhing flesh. Maya ducked under its attack, using its momentum to send it crashing into a bank of controls. The resonance frequency shifted, making her teeth vibrate. Fascinating. The warden's scientific curiosity seemed to overtake his fear for a moment. Even now, your body adapts to the radiation, the toxins. If you had been one of our original subjects. That's your mistake, Maya said, advancing despite the pain that radiated through her body. You think adaptation is just about survival. But humans don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to protect others, to fight injustice, to expose truth. The chamber shook as another explosion rocked the prison. Above them, the riot continued to spread. Maya's message had reached every corner of Nexus 7, and the response was overwhelming. Even species that had been traditional enemies were uniting against the horror of what had been happening in these depths. Iku. Maya spoke into her communicator. Can you stabilize the containment pods? Working on it. But Maya, the resonance chamber is reaching critical levels. The whole system could collapse. The warden laughed, a sound with an edge of madness. You see, even if you save them, the frequency disruption will kill them all. Their enhanced bodies are too attuned to the resonance. When it fails, Maya reached the central platform, ignoring the guards who were too busy fighting their own failed experiments to stop her. The control panel was complex, but she recognized elements from her investigation of the colony ships. Maybe you're right, she said, her fingers flying over the controls. Maybe they're too adapted to survive without the resonance. But you forgot something important about human adaptation. The warden's eyes widened as he realized what she was doing. No, you'll kill yourself. We adapt to save others, Maya continued, overriding the safety protocols. And sometimes that means making the ultimate adaptation. She slammed her hand down on the final control. The resonance frequency that had been torturing the colonists began to shift, finding a new focal point. Maya gasped as she felt it enter her body, using her own enhanced adaptability as a conduit. Maya. Iku's voice was frantic. What are you doing? Giving them a chance, she ground out through clenched teeth. The colonists, their bodies need time to readjust. I can hold the frequency, maintain the pattern they need. The warden stared at her in horrified fascination. Impossible. No single organism could channel that much energy. But Maya was proving him wrong. Her body, already enhanced by months of exposure to the prison's hostile environment, took on the resonance pattern. It was agony beyond anything she'd experienced, but she held on, becoming a living bridge between the colonists and their freedom. Around them, the containment pods began to cycle down. One by one, the colonists started to wake, their bodies gradually releasing their dependence on the artificial frequency as Maya's cells provided the transition they needed. The failed experiments seemed to sense the shift. They turned toward Maya, drawn by the resonance she now channeled. But instead of attacking, they began to stabilize, their twisted forms slowly returning to something closer to their original states. Gorn, Maya managed to speak through the pain. Get them out. Get them all out. The massive Kralaxian appeared in the doorway, leading a group of inmates who began helping the awakening colonists. His armor plates rippled with concern when he saw Maya's condition. Small one, he rumbled. You cannot sustain this. Long enough, she gasped. Just long enough. The warden made a break for the exit, but was caught by his own former test subjects. They dragged him back, their partially healed forms a testament to his crimes. Maya felt her consciousness starting to fade as the resonance burned through her. But she could see the colonists being evacuated, could hear Iku coordinating their escape through the prison's compromised security systems. Her investigation had cost her everything. but the truth would finally be known. As darkness crept into her vision, Maya smiled. Sometimes the price of truth wasn't just facing death, it was embracing it to save others. She only hoped that her sacrifice would ensure no one else would suffer in places like Nexus 7. The resonance reached its peak, and Maya Chen, journalist and hero, prepared to make her final adaptation. The galaxy remembered the fall of Nexus 7 as the day that changed everything. Some called it a riot, others a revolution, but those who were there knew it as the day a single human's courage exposed the darkest secrets of the Galactic Conclave. Maya Chen should have died in that resonance chamber. By all known science, channeling that much energy through a living organism was impossible. But then, humans had a habit of defying the impossible. When the rescue teams finally reached the lower levels, they found Maya unconscious but alive, her cells still humming with residual resonance. The colonists had all survived, their bodies successfully transitioning back to normal function. Even the failed experiments had begun to heal, their twisted forms slowly returning to their original states. The warden and his conspirators faced justice in a very public trial that shook the conclave to its foundations. Maya's evidence, broadcast from Nexus 7's own systems, exposed decades of illegal experiments and corruption. The sight of the colonists testifying, describing their ordeal and the human prisoner who had saved them, moved even the most hardened conclave officials. But the true impact of Maya's actions went far beyond a single trial. Her sacrifice had demonstrated something profound about humanity that changed how other species viewed them. "I never understood humans before," Gorn rumbled, standing beside Maya's medical pod in the rehabilitation center. "We Kralaxians adapt through armor, through strength. But you adapt through choice." Maya, still recovering from her ordeal, managed a weak smile. Sometimes the strongest adaptation is knowing when to be weak for others. Iku, their digital presence flickering in a nearby console, added their perspective. "The data from your cellular transformation is remarkable. Your body didn't just channel the resonance, it improved upon it, created a safer frequency that helped the others adapt back to normal." The medical bay was filled with former prisoners and test subjects, all in various stages of recovery. Many were species that traditionally avoided each other, yet here they worked together, helping one another heal from their shared trauma. "The conclave is changing," Iku continued. "Your story has sparked a movement for reform. They're calling it the Human Protocol. New laws protecting the rights of all species in detention, and strict oversight of any research involving involuntary subjects." Maya watched a group of children, former colonists, playing in the recovery garden outside her window. Their laughter was the sweetest reward for everything she'd endured. "But the biggest change," Gorn said with surprising gentleness, "is in how they see humanity. Not as a threat to be contained, but as an example to follow." The news feeds were full of stories about human adaptability being studied openly, ethically, with voluntary participants. The qualities that had made humans targets for exploitation were now being seen as gifts to be learned from. Maya touched the scars left by months of neural lashes, by toxic atmosphere and radiation exposure. They were badges of survival, reminders of what she'd endured to expose the truth. "We're not special," she said softly. "Every species has the capacity for courage, for sacrifice. Sometimes, they just need to be reminded." A commotion at the door drew their attention. A group of former inmates from various species entered, led by a tall Arxian carrying a data crystal. "The historical archives are complete," the Arxian announced. "Every detail of what happened at Nexus 7, preserved for future generations. They will know the truth." Maya nodded, satisfaction warming her heart. That's what she'd fought for. Not just justice for the victims, but a permanent record that would prevent such horrors from happening again. As she looked around at the gathered beings, former prisoners, rescued colonists, reformed experiments, Maya saw the future she'd nearly died to create. Different species working together, learning from each other, growing stronger through cooperation rather than exploitation. The resonance that had nearly killed her had left its mark. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she could still feel it humming in her cells. But now it was a reminder rather than a torment. A reminder that adaptation wasn't just about survival. It was about choice, about sacrifice, about making the universe better for those who would come after. "What will you do now?" Gorn asked. "Return to journalism." Maya looked down at the data pad in her lap, where she'd been composing her account of everything that had happened. But she wasn't writing it as just a news story. It was a testament to the power of truth, to the strength found in standing up against injustice, and to the remarkable capacity of all sentient beings to adapt and grow. "I'll tell the story," she said, "not just of what happened in Nexus 7, but of what comes after. Because the real story isn't about human adaptability or alien experiments. It's about what happens when different species choose to stand together against injustice." Outside, the sun was setting on a changed galaxy. The legacy of Nexus 7 would be not just in laws or protocols, but in the understanding that true strength comes not from domination, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others. Maya Chen had entered Nexus 7 as a prisoner seeking truth. She emerged as living proof that humanity's greatest adaptation was not their ability to survive, but their capacity to change the very systems that sought to break them. The resonance chamber was gone, but a new frequency was building. The harmony of different species working together toward a better future, and that was a story worth any price to tell.